Recently, a dear friend of mine gave me a copy of this book called 30 Years, a Watchtower Slave by William J. Schnell. I am finding it a very interesting read. I haven't gotten all the way through it yet, but so far it is just fascinating. So, Mr. Schnell joined the organization in the 1920s, and he was living in Germany at the time, though I believe he was actually from America originally. It's really interesting to see how things developed from his perspective in the early years of the organization. I wanted to point out one really interesting point that has just jumped out at me since I started reading it, because I think it is so much groundwork that developed into the shunning policies that the Watchtower now inflicts on its members. This is kind of where it started. Now, as I said, this is one man's experience, so I'm not going to pretend that everything he says is just perfectly accurate. I mean, I think he probably did his best to be as accurate as he could. And I also have some questions about his perspective too, because he believes himself to have always been a Christian all the way through the 30 years that he was in the Watchtower. And eventually, of course, he recognized that the Watchtower was not the true religion and he left. But at the same time, he called himself a Christian while agreeing with particularly Charles Taze Russell's teachings on things like Jesus not being God. So I have questions about what his religion actually was. I really don't know. So I kind of take that with a grain of salt. Nonetheless, his experiences are really, really interesting, and you can just see how they relate so much to what witnesses experience today and what I've heard from countless ex-Jehovah's Witnesses about their experiences, which vary widely, of course, but you can just see how it all draws together. So I just wanted to read this little passage from this book and show you kind of what I think is the foundation of the shunning that they do now. So this is on page 65 that it starts, and then just goes into a little bit of page 66, and I'll just kind of zoom in a little bit here so you can see what I'm reading. So this is in the 1920s when they were getting to the point where they were standing against war, taking the pacifist stand and that sort of thing. And of course, not everybody in the organization agreed with all of the direction they were going. And that in itself is really interesting to see how many witnesses were so enthusiastic in the early days, and then they were forced out because they wanted to maintain their individualism and that sort of thing. And that was just absolutely not allowed in the Watchtower. So starting in the last paragraph on page 65, it says, in answering as to how to treat opposers to the truth promulgated by the Watchtower Society, if they were once members of the faith and have recanted, representatives of the society often say it is impossible to kill them, as the laws of the land do not permit that. But were God's law in effect, meaning we as God's organization, already the New World Society, then they would be killed. The best thing to do under the circumstances is to treat them as if they were dead. They were not long in putting these concepts into practice. So you can certainly see how that would feed the attitude that you see from most Jehovah's Witnesses when somebody is kicked out of the organization or tries to leave, in that they are shunned. So nobody will look them in the eye. They'll cross the street to stay away from them. They're essentially treating them as if they're dead. And it just amazes me that he's telling us that the organization was making it sound as if really they should be dead. That if they had more authority and it wasn't against the law, they would actually go and kill them. That's incredible. I mean, if this is not the sign of a cult, what is? I probably would like to comment more and do some more videos as I go through this book, because, you know, there's just so much interesting experience from this fellow. He's got a lot of information coming from, especially from the perspective of being in Germany leading up to World War II. He watched what happened with the Nazis. And he actually seems to have, this is what I'm seeing, he seems to have recognized a correlation between how the Nazis were treating people and how the Watchtower was treating its followers. They seemed to be kind of following the Nazi propaganda and using that as a way to have power over their own people. That's just one thing that I'm noticing. Anyway, there's a lot. There's so much there that I'm finding really fascinating. I hope that answers some questions for some of you guys, especially XJWs, as to what kind of mindset they're in and how they're using that to essentially brainwash people to shun their own family members and friends, people that they actually love. It's a really despicable practice that they do. And you can see where they're getting their defense of that, why they feel like they have to do that, because that's exactly how many XJWs are treated. They're treated as if everyone that they knew and loved actually wishes they were dead. I don't think that they necessarily do wish they were dead. They're just taught that that's how they're supposed to feel. That's what they're supposed to do. That's just utterly sickening. There is just nothing at all that's Christian about this kind of behavior. So this sounds to me like an interesting little piece of the puzzle of how this cult has developed from the early days. If you've read the book, I'd love to read your comments and see what you think about this, the things you agreed with, disagreed with, things that you found helpful or interesting, and whether you would recommend it as well to other people. So far from what I've read, I would say that I would recommend it because there's just a lot of really interesting experiences in here and very detailed, because this fellow actually worked his way up the ranks and was a very, very eager young follower of the organization. And even as it really transitioned, in his view, from being a religion all about caring for people, about loving Jesus and serving God and all these kinds of things, and it really moved into a corporation with sales tactics. Because as I'm sure you probably know, in those early days, they sold their literature and they had sales quotas to meet. And the whole corporation structure was something that he noticed, the way that it changed. It went from being a religion that felt like a family to being very much a place where he worked, a place where there was work incentive that was based on corporate structure, which we definitely can see is very much the heart of the organization today. They are a corporation, an organization. They're not a religion even. They're a group of people controlling other people, using them as free slave labor to make money. And this book of this fellow's experience kind of helps you to see how they did that. It's quite fascinating. So thanks for checking this out with me. And I wanted to let you know, an update to the last video that I did, that I have gone ahead and started a Patreon account. So because of my health issues, I am struggling to do as much as I would like with these videos, and I'm hoping to get some medical care that will help get me kind of back on track a little bit, give me more energy to be able to talk more with witnesses and to make more videos for you guys. And I love that so many of you are so eager to tune in and check this out. So if you're interested in keeping this going, I would ask you, if you're able, to help me out on my Patreon account, and hopefully we can make something even more of this. In the meantime, I'm going to keep on doing my best to provide content for you guys, and I hope you'll keep tuning in, and we'll just move forward and trust the Lord to do whatever He wants to do for His glory in this whole situation. God bless.